Good morning, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, hermanos y hermanos. Welcome to another edition of the Live from the Heartland show. I'm Michael James. I'm here with my cohorts, Thom Clark and Katy Hogan, and we are ready to bring you a wonderful lineup of guests. We're going to have Robin Potter and Nieves Bolaños. They're going to talk about many things. They're lawyers. They work with the CTU. We're going to have Renato Mariotti, and he is running for Attorney General. And then we have an old friend, Justin OBrien. He's coming up. He's going to talk about Yippie 1968, and that'll bring up a lot of stories that the three hosts are pretty familiar with. So let's get going with another edition of the Live from the Heartland show.
And
Onward.
I just want
Good
to
morning,
point out,
Michael.
that Stan Champion started our show this morning.
Oh,
One of the
great.
many guests that we're featuring this morning who will be at our benefit concert on February 11th. Thank you, Stan, for helping us out.
Stan the man.
We love Stan, and we also, we definitely want you to know that this party on February 11th, which is the third annual, and it's tied up with, Mardi Gras. It's Mardi Gras weekend. We will be having some great times. You should come in to the bar, 7006 North Glenwood Avenue up in Rogers Park. 20 bands, 3 hosts, no waiting. All right, so this has been a week. We started with the government in absentia last week, and they figured it out, but they didn't get DACA finished.
No, they didn't.
They left the dreamers hanging again.
They did. And it's, there are a lot of splits going on. But in 3 weeks, or now 2 weeks, we get to go through it again. And the White House has come up with a new plan that has everybody upset. Of course, those are the kind of situations where compromise often happens, which hasn't been the case with this Congress very much, or this president. So who knows what kind of an immigration plan he might bring back from Europe.
I think the hardest thing about right now, for people like Dick Durbin, is the yammering from without that is, you shouldn't talk to any of those people, you shouldn't be making any compromises. But the fact of the matter is, if the government stayed shut down, we are the losers.
Yeah.
Our money is just running away, and it doesn't work. And
the CHIP program got funded.
it did
for
get funded,
eight-
but then again,
6 years.
so did the wall. But I like the approach that other people were saying, this wall is never going to get built.
No.
No.
So just let them have it in this particular round of talks, and make sure it's paired with the DACA resolution.
And make sure that every environmental challenge we can throw up against a concrete wall gets done, because what's left of the judiciary might actually protect our rights.
Yeah, exactly.
Not for much longer if this guy stays in, but at least
That's
for the
right.
moment, we have some judges that might actually look at the law and make decisions based on the law.
That's right.
One of the things going around is, speaking of the border, is there are volunteers who put water out in the desert for
Right.
people who go through this Death Valley scene.
Yeah, and idiots who go along and throw them out.
Well, yeah, the border patrol people have been dumping the water, kicking it over, and they put up a video of them doing that. And then a little bit later, they arrested one of the principal people, a professor from Arizona.
This is because we are strong promoters of family values in this country, and particularly trying to keep families together.
Okay, is that sarcasm visible to our audience out there? I know that this is an audio medium.
Yeah, but we
But,
sometimes have video going up.
We do
and
indeed.
We will again, I'm sure.
We do indeed. Let's get local.
We had a great membership meeting of Network 49 this past week. The leading vote-getters were our favorite Kelly Cassidy, along with Dan Biss, who's running for governor, and Fritz Katy for county assessor. We had both the assessor candidates who are challenging burials present. A vigorous discussion amongst the membership about that particular campaign as well as others. And we're feeling pretty good about the engagement that took place in
Yeah, it
our
was
first straw poll.
It was a beautiful community engagement moment to just talk with our neighbors about this very, very important primary, which is why one of our guests today is another of the lineup of Attorney General candidates. So we're going to find out how Mr. Mariotti distinguishes himself in that crowd.
How about the Women's March?
Oh, it was so great.
We had a good time.
It was so great. I really don't know.
Bigger
what
than
else-
last year, they say.
I know, and I can't believe that because
Yeah,
it was
it's
so
hard to
much more
believe.
comfortable. I mean, their logistics team get a major high five from me.
Well, probably working with the city on it, too.
Yeah.
I mean, it was smooth.
It was very smooth.
Chicago appears to have had the largest crowd of anyone in the country, at least.
I thought
don't
LA
know
was
about
I
claiming
think LA beat us out.
They claimed it anyhow. But we had a lot of people.
I never heard what happened in Vegas the next day, which was the central location for it. So here I am admitting on the radio I didn't find out that.
You better find out by next week.
Yeah, okay.
We
So,
want to note this week the passing of a couple of folks, a dear colleague of mine from Vietnam days, resisting the war, and also a wonderful poet, Johnny Baranski, passed away.
peace to you, Johnny.
He's been out in Seattle the last couple of decades and had become quite a revered haiku writer. And our peace and blessings to his family who were all there with him. Also a longtime West Side community activist, organizer, technologist is how I got to know him, trying to get computers into the hands of youth. Lowry Taylor passed away after a long illness, and he's one of these quiet giants in the West Side that many people didn't know about, but was a really, really important cog in helping the West Side keep its act together, and we're going to really miss his presence.
So we're going to cut our banter a little bit short here just so that we can get along. We've got a lot of people waiting to get on here. So make sure and get your tickets today for the February 11th third annual Mardi Gras benefit. And
How do they get the ticket?
they write you, Michael.
They can write a check to 1509, live from the Heartland, 1509 West 1, 60626. Or come to the event or just contact us.
Okay. You are listening to Live from the Heartland, 88.7 FM, WLUW.org, Facebook, YouTube, Heartland Media. And let's listen to some music from another one of our guests for February 11th, Jan James. Hey, hey, that was Ramblin' Rider by Jan James, who you could see on our stage on February 11th. All the music today will feature, most of it will feature folks who will be on that stage. We're real happy to welcome a guy I just met for the first time, Renato Mariotti, candidate for Illinois Attorney General. Welcome to Live from the Heartland, Renato.
Thank you. Real pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
So we are all getting to know you, but you had a pretty big article in Politico this past week making some comments about the case against the president for obstruction of justice. You feel the case has been getting made pretty well, and I'd like to hear more about your take on that and how this is all going to progress, particularly if the special counsel Mueller decides to throw some charges. Who's actually going to take them? The House, the Senate?
Mm-hmm.
What will happen with this investigation as it perhaps is reaching a conclusion?
Sure. Well, I did write that this week. I'll tell you, it is not easy to keep that stuff up while I'm on the campaign trail. So while I have a little bit of a cold today, it's a lot of hours working. But I do believe that at this point there's enough evidence to conclude that President Trump obstructed justice. And frankly, it should be something that we're concerned about. We should have more attention on it. And what I was trying to do in that piece is put all the evidence together. We keep hearing drips and drabs of different little pieces of the puzzle. And I feel like at this point, we hear so much news all the time about Trump. We hear all these, bad things that he's doing, evil things. And it's sort of, you almost get inoculated to. You're like, oh, another thing, and then you move
That's
on
right.
to the next
Yeah.
outrage, right? And the point was to put it all together like I used to do when I was a federal prosecutor doing white-collar crime. Put it all together and show people, hey, there's a pretty good case to be made here. But there's another subtext there, and this is what you're getting at with your question. There's a subtext to my piece, which is, I really believe Mueller is going to go to Congress. He's not going to indict. And what I want everyone to know, people listening to this broadcast, is you should not sit back at home and wait for Bob Mueller to save America. You need to get off your butts and save it yourselves.
Thank you so much.
I've been saying that for a long time. So you guys don't know me, but I'm somebody who's been organizing a lot of people online, particularly people in the resistance. And I've been beating this drum for many, many, many months now that you cannot rely on him. We're going to have to be the ones that take this country back. We're going to have to be the ones that fight. We have to organize. We got to vote.
So, in this crowded field of talent, how do you distinguish yourself in the group of 8 people? is it 8 running?
Yeah, there's 8 of us.
For Lisa Madigan's seat? Yeah.
I am the only outsider. I mean, folks who are listening don't know anything about me. I'm a guy who was literally born out of pretty much nothing. I mean, my parents didn't go to college. My dad didn't graduate from high school.
Where did you grow up, Renato?
My dad's from Cicero, mom's from Little Italy. We were in Little Italy when I was a kid, but very Italian, right, on both sides. When I was a kid, we were in Little Italy. Then we moved, I'm 41, we moved out to...
He's a very young-looking 41.
I'll take it.
A kid.
I'll take it.
A kid all dressed up in a nice suit.
I'll take it. A cheap suit, maybe. But
It looks good.
true story.
Purple tie.
But we moved out to Naperville back when it was farmland, and you could get a home for under $100K.
Sure.
So, we were always struggling, and I'm somebody. Look, I have the only candidate who hasn't put in hundreds of thousands of my own dollars in it. I rely on small dollar grassroots contributions. The hundreds of thousands of supporters that we have online have been really the base of our campaign. We got over 8,700 engaged volunteers who are literally texting and calling. We have several thousand contributors who have done small dollar contributions. Our average contribution size is under $100. And we are doing a campaign where I'm not an elected politician. I'm running for the first time. I'm not somebody who is beholden to anybody, but I'm a guy who graduated from Yale Law School. I was a federal prosecutor for a decade, and I handled landmark cases. I was the first prosecutor in the country to convict a high-frequency trader, which is not easy to do. It's hard to convince a jury and explain that to a jury.
Impressive.
Well, thank you. But it's the sort of case that that we need to be bringing in as Attorney General. We're going after people who are powerful. We're taking advantage of people like my family, and we need to fight for economic justice.
Renato Mariotti, who is a candidate for Attorney General. Lisa Madigan had also some very high-profile cases. She went after mortgage lenders who screwed people out of their homes. She was involved in several environmental things. But she didn't do much with political corruption, which one could say may be the most important thing we ought to be looking at as a state to clean up our politics and the way we govern. What would be your priorities as an Attorney General? What is it as the people's lawyer that you would be paying direct attention to?
Sure. Well, one I talked about just a minute ago, which is economic justice, because you need to have an Attorney General. Excuse me. I said I had a cold. You need to have an Attorney General who's going to be fighting for working people who need a lawyer to fight for them. Wage theft is a big issue to me, for example. Going after financial institutions that are taking advantage of working people, because now with the Consumer Bureau, the CFPB, now that Trump has been gutting it, they literally are forcing people into arbitration.
Right.
You can't do class actions. You need an Attorney General out there doing it. But look, we also need to be aggressively going after and standing up to Trump. I really like Lisa Madigan and I respect her, but I'm part of Indivisible Chicago, and we had to be calling up to convince her office to join those suits against Trump. It shouldn't be that way. And also, I will say we need to investigate, what happened with our voting machines here in Illinois, because there was an attack on our voting machines by the Russians. David Orr's been looking into that, but there's very little attention that's been paid to that. I think that's important too. But I will say as well, as to political corruption, I think we need to be investigating more, not just on the criminal side, because people always talk about indictments and convictions, and that's fine. But we need to have a higher standard for our politicians in Illinois, where it's not just if you're not indicted. You talked about right? It's got to be. You got to be better than that.
A little higher bar than you didn't get arrested while you're in office.
Exactly, and you talked about the assessor's race. I endorsed Fritz Katy, for example, and the reason I did it is I'm not sure. I haven't investigated whether Berrios has committed a crime, but there's a lot that smells about what's going on in the property tax system, and it's unfair to people disadvantaged communities. So that's the sort of thing where the Attorney General can conduct investigations and shed some sunlight.
Mr. Mariotti, Renato.
Oh.
I love your name.
Oh, wow.
Renato.
Say it well.
You know that Lisa Madigan joined in the suit related to the DOJ report on Chicago police and looking for a consent decree. What's your position vis-a-vis Chicago police, consent decree, and cleaning it up?
So it was the right move for her to make, and it's sort of a second best thing. In an ideal world, we would have had federal government coming in, but I don't trust Jeff Sessions as far as I could throw him, and so they are not really interested in doing any kind of oversight. So I think it's necessary so that we can have somebody doing some oversight there. It's going to take a lot of work, but our work doesn't end there. Because first of all, I don't know if any of you saw this WBZ report. There's all these suburban police departments having big problems as well, and the reality is that, the police have totally lost the trust of the community, and so there's just unfortunately a lot of work to be done there. The AG can have a role, but it needs to be broader than that, and all of us need to hold our elected officials accountable so that when there are shootings, we're getting to the bottom of it and reforming the way the police work. As somebody who investigated cops, it's when I was a federal prosecutor, it's not easy to do, and we have to have political change, not just investigative change.
We're going to have this in the headlines even more as the trial of the officer accused of shooting Laquan McDonald comes into play this spring, and it's going to bring up a lot of different divisions, including why don't we respect the police who are out there every day trying to save us from our communities. But this trial is likely to stir up a lot of different passions and emotions. Do you think there's a way we can use it to begin some of the racial healing that clearly needs to happen in this very segregated city, or are we going to have to look at some other avenue for that?
Well, we need to do that. I mean, we do need to come together as a city. I'm afraid that the trial's not going to do it. I mentioned earlier, the difficulty I had when I was investigating police officers. It's very hard to do. I know that Kim Fox has been trying to work along this front, in terms of investigation and trying to kind of get some trust with the community. I think it's difficult, and I really think we need to demand more leadership from our elected representatives. I mean, I think there's a lot of distrust of Mayor Emanuel with good reason on this issue, and if he wants to keep his job and keep our trust, which I think is hanging in the balance, he needs to get out there and be more of a leader on this issue, and he's not.
Vis-a-vis the governor's race, who do you like best? Who would you like to be working with if you were Attorney General?
Wow, none of them are endorsing me, so I don't know if I should be endorsing one of them in the air. I will say most of my supporters support Dan Biss. We just tend to draw from the same pool, I suppose. I always joke that most of my supporters are not interested in electing billionaires. They're interested in imprisoning them or investigating them or whatever. And obviously that's a joke. Okay, I'm not saying that all the billionaires.
To some people, maybe not to some billionaires.
But in all seriousness, look, I'm a guy who made my mark investigating the rich and powerful, and there's definitely that support. But I will say I'm not a big fan of Governor Routers. So whoever one of them.
Thank God.
Yeah, whatever one of them gets elected, I'll work with the person, and I know. But I will tell you something. You can see in that race that the effect of money in politics, and it's affected my race too. I mean, we're talking about all the small money. I mean, I put photos of my dog on Twitter and raise $20 at a time. Meanwhile, there's no.
I'm going to try that.
Yeah, you should. There's no caps in my race. So my dog will raise all this money in small money contributions, and one financier will come in and give a $150,000 check to an opponent. That's just unfortunate that our system is that way. It's a disgrace.
I think that you are you're pretty interested in the environmental issues that face our state.
Yeah.
As an Attorney General, would you try to end fracking, hydraulic fracking?
Yeah, we have a law.
Was that a yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
We have so just so we're clear, I'm sorry.
Clearly.
Well, you've got my cold working against us here, but we have a law that allows it in Illinois, but we have very, very stringent standards, and I think that we have and I give Lisa Madigan credit for
this. That's
right. She has made it so that it pretty much she's very vigorously enforced it, so we actually haven't had any fracking. But look, what I was supposed to be doing, I'm not somebody who's been plotting to run for Attorney General or anything else really. This year, I was planning to spend my time with Illinois Environmental Council and Sierra Club this cycle and this year. Really, we were building up to bring in a lot of private attorneys to do a public-private partnership in conjunction with the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. And frankly, if I'm Attorney General, I'll be able to do it on a little bit bigger scale. So,
what role should restorative justice play in the way criminals are are processed by our system. We have mass incarceration that largely affects young men of color,
Yeah.
and something's off there. But might restorative justice and other reconciliation techniques help us solve that issue?
It can play a part. I think from the way I look at it, we have an incarceration crisis in Illinois, and we have, I think, 131% capacity in our prisons in Illinois. And what I've done, I went to the United States Senate because they asked me to talk about pardons. And when I talked about there, it was not probably what they want. They were expecting me to talk about Trump and pardons, I think. But what I talked about was the use of the pardon power by governors to give clemency. And so if you ever get any of these gubernatorial candidates in this chair, I want you to ask him, because I've asked some of them, including Mr. Biss and Diber and others, privately. We should have our gubernatorial candidates out there promising that they're going to invite every nonviolent drug offender to apply for clemency. That's the only way to work backwards.
I like
That's
that.
the way to work backwards. Because right now you can have any reform going forwards, but it's not going to deal with all these people
Well,
who are in prison.
Isn't Tom Dark doing a pretty good job of lowering the occupancy rate at Cook County?
The Cook County Jail.
Right.
And that also, you got to give credit to Chief Judge Evans on that front and the bail front. But in terms of our prisons, they're very overcrowded across the whole state.
Yeah.
Very overcrowded.
Renato Mariotti, thank you so much for joining us. It was good to meet you and to hear about your case for becoming the next Attorney General of Illinois. There's an upcoming forum where all of you folks will be featured again. We really urge people to go and see it. I think it's on February.
Which one, the Sierra
4th.
Club one?
Well, actually, there are a couple coming up.
There's a lot. Do you want to invite anybody to something public that they can see you at?
Well, geez, what I would actually ask people to do is go to my website.
Sure.
Renato Mariotti, Renato. Last name is Mariotti. RenatoMariotti.com. You're going to get our full schedule, and you can sign up for updates and be part of our grassroots campaign.
Thank you so
Beautiful.
much.
Nice to meet you.
We're listening
Well,
live from the
thank you.
Heartland and WLUW 88.7 FM. Let's have a little bit more music from one of our upcoming performers at our benefit concert on February 11th.
Thank you. It's Lucy Smith, the very one who will be at the Live from the Heartland benefit on February 11th at the Heartland Bar, formerly known as the Red Line Tap. We're really honored now to have a couple of people who are working hard out there to bring justice on a lot of fronts. We've got Robin Potter and Nieves Bolaños, and they are progressive lawyers who do a lot of work with the Chicago Teachers Union. And they have a lot of stuff that they want to talk about. In fact, Robin brought
Technical term,
the
folks,
biggest-
lots of stuff.
Yeah, we got every case she's working on here. It's like this is your new office. Good morning to you both.
Good morning, and thank you all for having us.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. Really, what is the deal? You brought a flippin' library with you, Robin. Is it because we're all getting old and we need our notes? Is that the deal?
Could be. I mean, I've done
Not as
Brandon
old as us.
Johnson's show. We've done a lot of speaking, and so we just always want to have the facts if we can. But you never know what'll come up, and so we just want to be prepared. Although we probably could talk for about 4 hours without notes.
I bet.
On your mark, get set, go.
So many people have been reading about or hearing about the crisis in special education with the Chicago Public Schools. And it has a lot to do with the public face, which is now gone, claiming one thing, and the actual parents trying to receive special ed services experiencing something else. As a parent as a grandparent in that situation, I've been particularly intrigued with the WBEZ series and of course the work lawyers like you have been doing behind the scenes to try to get the public schools to do what's right. So fill our listeners in about the current status of alleged reforms and how special ed under the new leadership is going to be carried out.
I can't say exactly what the new leadership might do, but what Nieves and I are litigation counsel for the Chicago Teachers Union, and through the course of that, attending a lot of meetings and a lot of discussions with a lot of our educators who are special education teachers, counselors, guidance counselors. It became apparent in 2016 when they reported to us that the individual education plan, which is required by federal and state law, would lock. So when they said Tom's grandchild needs transportation, they couldn't put it in because CPS electronically configured it on a default to lock and say, no, your child isn't getting transportation or a paraprofessional to help this poor child diaper and feed. You're talking about 52,000 special education kids in CPS. And the CTU educators are really devoted. They want to do their job. They can't do their job when the central office runs interference and blocks them from providing services that are required and needed. And we had the good fortune of testifying last week before the House Education Committee on this, headed up by Representative Crespo and Will Guzzardi and others, and said it's a crime.
Yeah.
These services must be provided. So what they will do in light of the EZ report, the alliance between the CTU and other activists like, Raise Your Hand and Access Living, we are working cooperatively and together, and actually Nieves will be at the ISB hearing on Monday, which is now opening hearings based on the request of the CTU and all the SPED activists together, combined, collective. Excuse me. To say, we need to take a look at this, and we need change, and you need to stop intentionally denying services. And I'm really pleased that the new CEO testified last week before the House hearings, like, we cut services due to budget. You can't do that.
Chicago Public Schools, from the time that we were growing up, particularly when I was growing up on the South Side, was basically used as a cudgel to keep segregation happening in Chicago, which was already the most segregated city in Chicago. So, and it continues. It's an incredibly class-based, tracked system. How do you two deal with that, and what do you think is the current battleground to break through that incredible wall?
We're really happy for that question, Katy, and we welcome it. So, part of this segues into how you build a resistance movement and a movement that changes society, and
Yeah.
we're really proud to represent a union like the Chicago Teachers Union since 2009 with their caucus in 2010 when they first took over the union. So when the labor movement fights for equality and justice, the results are a little different, and the CTU has built community with COCO and other groups to change the system, take some power back to the people, the neighborhoods, the community, to stop the mayor from running these schools down. So what we were commissioned to do for the CTU, some is successful, some not, and we use the courts as progressive lawyers, as we're just street fighters in that court. Change will not come from that. It comes from building a people's movement, as all of you know, from being progressive and activists. And that's our mandate from the union, is to use the litigation to build the struggle of the union and our members and the people in the community to stop the racism and segregation. What's happened in our lawsuits, and people should look on our website, it's an indictment. It's an outrage. We have posted expert reports that say due to segregation, black teachers, black educators, black schools are being shuttered, teachers being laid off. 2 of the lawsuits, one will probably go to trial this year, questions these 10 turnarounds. These schools were making progress, and they're black schools.
Right.
And there's no justification for it. Our expert reports are
No
about,
justification for them being shut down?
other than race.
Right, okay.
There is no justification for the layoffs, the school closings, or the shutdowns, or the turnarounds, other than race.
Let's hear Nieves' voice. I want to hear from you what it's like to be a street fighter in the courtroom.
I like that.
That's her.
Street fighters.
That's her.
It's never easy, and it's a lot of sleepless nights, I think. But Robin's right. We have these systems in place, and we see them all too often not available or accessible to the folks who need them the most. So what we pride ourselves on is trying to be able to ferret out those issues and create a way to frame the issues so that we can take them into those forums and we can have those voices represented and heard in a way that potentially changes the landscape of how things are being done in the status quo, because as we can see, this is one of many watershed movements right now. I think people in Chicago are starting to see that there still is a huge problem with racial segregation. And we're also starting to hear from neighborhoods who say, we see what you're trying to do with our neighborhood.
Right.
This school closings is just part of a larger plan. I think Karen
Always.
Lewis has said it a million times. She said, I see what they're trying to do. Do you see what they're trying to do? Do you see the plan for this particular neighborhood? And so, it's just another place, another forum where we can say, here's what's going on, here are the facts, and this is why.
Yeah.
And hold people accountable. We get some really good public pleadings that then we can publicize and, make accessible to people who maybe, didn't know that this was going on or didn't know the extent, or that there are all these different options for saying no and trying to change the status quo.
And we want to give a shout out to everyone listening. We're so honored that Michael and Thom and Katy are doing this show. If you're a parent, if you're in the community, if you're a teacher, an educator, a trade unionist, if you're retired, get out there, be activists. Get in the street, join your union, join Indivisible Struggle. And you got to throw this mayor out. And you got to elect people who represent working people. For example, we need an elected school board. We have people who represent the mayor. We have 400,000 students in the Chicago public schools, over 23,000 educators, and we're stymied by a political process as corrupt as the dailies, which is why, and we give a shout out to our friend Brandon Johnson too, who's running for Cook County Commissioner, like to change that power structure. We're democratically minded people who fight for equality day after day, make it a reality like the Progressive Caucus is trying, like Will is trying in the state Senate and House. So we give a shout out to everyone listening. Get active. Do something.
So clearly more activism is needed, and thank God we have lawyers that are paying attention to the law in this fake news era we're in. But it strikes me with a mayor who told Karen Lewis to her face, 25% of your kids are never going to learn. How are we going to change the hearts and minds behind that kind of mentality, which I'm afraid is not just the mayor's feeling or belief, but too many other Chicagoans who just have written off whole parts of the west and south side because they're never going to learn.
Well, I think part of what we do in these lawsuits and what the CTU does, and people should go on their website, they've done amazing studies like Black and White of CPS, the Schools Our Children Deserve. It's full of, we work closely with the media, BEZ and other friends, to say these schools are not failing.
Right.
These kids, you are intentionally failing them due to racism, segregation, and privatization. They have put more money into charters at the same time they're closing schools. So it's not our babies who are failing. It's the system failing them. We tried the injunction in 2013 on behalf of the union to stop the 50 school closings.
Yeah.
It was an outrage and remains an outrage.
Yeah.
And they're trying to close now 4 highly functioning African American schools.
High schools.
High schools.
Right.
In Inglewood.
And,
Right, in
and
Inglewood. And where they built a new school and won't let these babies into this school. So I think one thing we do as progressive lawyers, along with the National Lawyers Guild and our brothers and sisters in the National Employment Lawyers Association, is we call it out and we call it for what it is. It's racism.
pure and simple.
Right.
Straight ahead. We come from an activist ward, 49, and we actually voted last year to freeze charter schools in our ward. Not that our current alderman is going to pay attention to that, but we're hoping to change that too. Speaking of which,
You heard it here.
you mentioned Brandon Johnson, who's running for Cook County Commissioner. How are you guys connected to him, and in general, broader than Brandon's race? Do you see hope in this whole crop of new candidates coming up, folks who are running despite the fact that they don't have $1 million, that sort of thing? Do you see hope there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really exciting time in Chicago politics for once, because we have a progressive caucus that is actually very active
And growing.
and growing
Let's
every day, every cycle. It's growing, and the quality and the quantity of candidates coming out of that caucus is just really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And we try to stay involved and supportive, because these are the folks who are going to change the laws here in Chicago. They're going to change the laws in Cook County. They're going to change the laws in our state. So it's very important for us make sure that there is a slate of candidates that's working towards the progressive change that we want to see both in our city and our state. So no, it's extremely exciting. And, again, it's another one of those watershed movements that, I think people just said, look, we're tired of the machine. And what we're hearing coming from Rahm Emanuel and, the people he puts in power is, in exchange for, whatever kind of political favors they have going on,
Right.
it's not working. It's not working for our city. And we want to see some real change. And I think that's what's helped spawn this movement and really keep it growing and kept the momentum behind it. People care about their neighborhoods.
Right. And Katy, Michael, and I probably came out of some of the same progressive movements that have made us lifetime activists out of the anti-war movement. So what Nieves and I are seeing now, and we actually thank the right and the right supremacists for engendering massive protests and organization of working people and women to say, we want to take some power back in this country. We don't want a predator in the White House. We're not going to put up with more centrist leadership that says you can build a wall for $35 billion and keep dreamers out of this. So we're really pleased to be part of a movement of indigenous people. We do a lot of sexual harassment, rape, assault cases, including, unfortunately, some in Chicago public schools, but mainly in other industries. And we're so proud to see women finally standing up saying no.
Yep.
And we're seeing that too in movements like progressive labor movements like the CTU, who says no means that you, Brandon Johnson, Gazzardi, whomever you are, Chewy, that you represent people to give people power, not to give yourselves power. And
Amen.
that's a new brand of
Yeah.
progressive leadership.
That's right.
We're so proud to know Sue Garza, who is there not to, and people who are really fighting to empower working people and change the system so that it's based more on equality. Part of what I did to prepare for today, and as part of my huge notebook that Michael took pictures of, is, Nieves and I do a lot of race cases, a lot of noose cases, and,
A lot of
noose, like what the Klan used to.
That's
hang
what I
in
thought you said.
factories. And so, one of the
Jeez.
leading cases we cite was 1896, a brother trying to get on a railroad car that was segregated by race. And in 1896, the Supreme Court held in Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal is constitutional under the 13th and 14th Amendment, which was not overturned until 1954 in Brown versus Board. And Nieves and I say it straight. In CPS, it is separate and unequal, as was in Plessy over 120 years ago. The situation is worse, and it needs reform. So we just have to call it what it is, and we have the data to prove it. It's an outrage.
Yeah. Do you think, given that here we are in 2018, and our next guest, we're going to be talking about 50 years ago, the great year of '68 and what went on. How do we convince Robin Potter and Nieves Bolaños, how do we convince young people who want to be activists that it's not hopeless, given what you just said about what we're still fighting, battles we're still fighting? I'm so grateful for the movement that is developing right now. I'm very excited. I've been waiting for it. But is it a problem for young people to look at us and go, didn't you guys fix this already?
I think it's encouraging, and I'm going to defer to Nieves because she's much more activist than me. It's really
And younger.
encouraging to see people going out in the community, a fighting union like the CTU and SEIU out there organizing community to vote. Chicago Votes, we just registered. There's 6,000 pretrial detainees in the Cook County Jail who are eligible to vote, not registered, who are getting registered. So that puts a little bit of power
great.
back.
That's great.
Nieves works a lot in the low-wage community and their
Struggle.
struggle.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting. Me and Robin go back and forth on this all the time. And what's enough? Is it enough to
There's never
hashtag
enough.
resist?
Never enough.
No, it's not enough. Okay, so what do? Well, you don't criticize the people who are hashtagging resist. Like, what's the balance? What do we need?
Thank you.
So we go back and forth a lot. It gets heated sometimes, but
We know nothing about that.
but I think, and I know that it's. People say, it's not enough to hit the streets. We can't just be out protesting because it's not going to be the only thing. We have to also combine that with community activism. But I do think that, you know, seeing people out on the streets and seeing the outrage they feel when, you know, we have the leader of our country making just blatantly racist comments all the time, and, you know, getting away with being a sexual harasser, a sexual assaulter.
Incredible.
I think that seeing that is something that motivates people to say, you know what, I'm over it too. I want to do something. And even, you know, you go to a protest, you're there, you meet people, you organize, you network, you know, become part of a community. And I think it all kind of leads into an increased activism generally, and in populations that maybe you wouldn't have seen it in had we not been pushed to such dire circumstances. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that people are not feeling just that, you know, gosh, we failed and now we're at the bottom and there's nothing we can do. I'm hopeful that people are really feeling energized by what's going on and outraged and, you know, getting involved, and I think one thing leads to another.
Nieves, you mentioned previously in a comment, look at our website. Could you give us that website?
Oh, sure. It's www.potterlaw.
Potter law, L-A-W.
Yep. .org. O-R-G.
Okay.
I also want to give a shout out, I know our time's up, you know, something that Karen's imbued in the CTU and us as lawyers. You always say to yourself, does this unite us, build our strength, and give us power? And one thing we do, and as legal activists with the Guild and stuff, we got to stop these judicial appointments. These are racists. These are people who will sit for life in the federal judiciary. He has over 80 appointments he can make now. So
And he's filling them quick.
And so we look forward to a united front with the ACLU and our partners in the Guild, you know, and for example, one of the very traditional law bulletin articles just published how Lawyers Guild lawyers were up with the water protectors defending them in criminal charges. We will be everywhere there is struggle to help build that struggle, and people like Brandon Johnson to help give power back to the people where it belongs.
And it is
Amen.
It is a huge issue. These judicial appointments can definitely change the face of the legal
We're
system.
going to make a topic out of that and probably have you back.
We'd love to.
We'd love to talk about
We want to thank you both for coming on. That's Robin Potter and Nieves Bolaños, and they are progressive lawyers working with the Chicago Teachers Union and a lot more.
Bless you both and all the
Okay.
work you do.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much.
Stick around after.
You're listening to Live on the Heartland on WLUW 88.7 FM. Let's have a little music from 50 years ago.
This CTA, Thom, tell us who that music was.
Chicago
Transit Authorities. We was going to say not to blah, blah, blah. Anyhow, we are going to take a little trip back in time, back to 1968, which was really a wonderful year, full of a lot of conflict and controversy. And an old friend of ours has a new book out. It's called Chicago Yippie 68. And the guy who wrote it is Justin OBrien. And good morning to you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Justin.
I'm glad to be here.
How did you, when did you decide to write this book, which covers basically 5 days in August of
Yes,
'68?
Yes, it does. It started as a letter to a girl who was a high school classmate.
Perfect.
Who had been in town and had to go back to Oklahoma, where her family moved the year before. And I was filling her in on what she'd missed and telling her it's a good thing you didn't hang around. And I either didn't mail the letter or I kept a draft. Sometimes I kept drafts of letters. And that, and also the fact that I would repeat the stories to others, you know, sitting around having a beer, whatever, talking to people about these stories. People would ask me, you know, say, tell those stories about the convention. They said, you have to write those down. So I did write vignettes of different things that happened. And then it was only when I was between jobs, many, many years later, that I decided to sort of
Expand.
Yes, I read some other accounts to get the chronology right, because it's often not clear, of course, after
Hey,
many, many
you
years
know,
to put it exactly in
If you remember it, you weren't there,
They
right?
do say that, of course. And I have a great example of that, actually involving Abe Peck, which I'll talk about.
A good friend of
Yes,
Michael's.
Yes, who was generous enough to write a nice blurb for me.
Yeah, it's nice.
It is nice.
Yeah.
So this book has a lot of photographs. It doesn't have one photograph that I happen to have been in tipping over
I
a
know that
padway.
photo.
But it's just wonderful. Did you take any of these photos, or are these all
A lot
just
of
from your collection and other people you know?
I took none of them, no.
Oh.
I acquired them from private individuals for the most part. Over many, many years. Acquired negatives and slides and got the assurances from people that they had the rights to give me, to reprint these and things. As far as I know, nothing in the book except for the 2 licensed photos have been in print before.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful little book, and I like reading a little bit about your background. I think you came out of Von Steuben High School.
I did.
And which Coach Russ Bradford, who's been a guest on the show, he's a big fan of Von. And it was largely a Jewish neighborhood. You were a Catholic dude.
That's right.
You were in the Boy Scouts, and
I was.
it was Rom's grandfather who was your troop leader,
He wasn't the troop leader, but he was, yes.
your coach or whatever
he
they
was sort
call
of a
it.
quartermaster or so.
That was an interesting.
Accompanied us.
That was an interesting story about being sort of accosted by a survivor of the Holocaust as a Boy Scout.
Yeah.
And I think
him
he was,
thinking you were a brown shirt.
yeah, basically
Yeah.
viewing you guys as the brown shirts.
You were raising money for the Boy Scouts.
Yeah,
Selling pancake breakfast fundraiser tickets. Yeah.
sure. As Girl Scouts, we sold cookies. You guys got to eat pancakes.
So
Again,
what- so,
unfairness. And the-
You were not supposed to be at the Democratic Convention. What was the story with your family?
I was not. I was one of those kids who was regularly in Lincoln Park. That was the hangout back then for countercultural kids. Old Town and Lincoln Park. And all summer long, and I believe part of the summer before, there have been weekend be-ins, these sort of happenings that are sort of nebulous as far as definition of them, but there would be live music.
I remember Siegel Schwall at one of those.
Siegel Schwall, of course, yeah, a lot of great local bands. And my parents knew that I was interested in this, and my father actually worked for the city, and so he probably knew more about it than I did. And, he wanted to get us out of town. I had 3 brothers.
where did he work?
He worked in City Hall.
I mean, what was his department?
He was in the law department.
My father worked for City Hall too, and I worked for him that summer.
Is that right?
Which
Yeah, and each
brought her
day,
downtown, so she was there.
during the convention, I would leave for lunch from my office and never come back. Because I would walk through the gatherings, in the park in Grant
Yeah.
Park. I heard Bobby Seale talk. I saw my favorite, McCarthy, talk to a bunch of gathered demonstrators. I did see the practicing with the stick.
Washoy.
Which you described perfectly. I think it was totally an act for the cameras that were there. It made no sense whatsoever. No one was going to have a stick that long.
And no one did it.
It was
No one did it.
It was the Yippie summer.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of putting the press on, a lot of it was just sort of...
Oh,
So
Mayor
how did-
Daley was very afraid that we were all going to have LSD in our water.
But I think it was part of Abbie Hoffman and others' genius, is that they knew how to manipulate how public opinion was framed and formed, and how they played the media, and they played them to a T.
They did. When you think of it, how much access to the media did he have? Very, very little. I mean, he just was a very loud figure. He sort of commanded attention. I knew of him only through the Seed, I think, through the underground newspaper here at the Seed. I didn't know any of the others who ultimately were indicted as the Chicago 8
Well, most of them didn't
conspirators.
know each other either.
Yeah, I think that's true. So I don't know how exactly Abbie Hoffman did that, but he really did have a way of commanding attention and shocking the media enough to get that repeated in the news.
You mentioned Abe Peck. Abe Peck. Man, tell us a little bit about how you got to know Abe.
Well, around the same time as a kid, we used to go to the Seed office and hang around. I sort of fancied one day I'd be a writer. And we would sell the Seed. We'd pick up a stack at various offices. At one time they were on
See it on
Halstead.
Wrightwood or when it moved over to Halstead?
Well, they were on Halstead, they were on Wrightwood at one time. I don't remember which was which.
Yeah.
And during this period, they were on LaSalle Street, just north of Chicago Avenue, in a storefront that you walk down into. So we go there, and they let kids hang around and take stacks of these things to sell on the street corner for $0.25. And I don't remember how much of that we got. Certainly not much, but it was a cool thing to do.
Yeah, that was the draw. It was a
Yeah.
cool thing to do.
It was.
And like you, I'm a year older than you because you were 17 going
Yeah.
to Old Town at the same time, and
Yeah.
that was what we did to
feel cool.
Yeah.
Is to get out of our neighborhoods, go down to Wells Street, go down to Lincoln Park, and kind of blend in.
Yeah.
And as a Catholic kid, it was hard for me to blend in. I looked like I was a cop. I mean, I was aware. I was.
That wasn't too long. Later, she took the cop
I did
exam.
take the cop exam.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. But they didn't take me.
Good for them.
But one of the things that you did point out was the amount of cops as part of the demonstration. Somebody estimated that for every 8 demonstrators, there was 2 officers or undercover
Not to mention
people.
National Guard.
Yeah.
And probably other organizations represented too.
Yeah, right.
Who knows?
Exactly. How do you feel when you look at then and now, 50 years later? Do you feel like what effect did we have? What's good about that? What's still to be done?
Well, it's sort of a personal frustration for me. I mean, I sort of feel that the immediate feeling was we failed, of course, because at that point, only half the people who were to die in Vietnam had died by that point. 28,000 more men died
That's right.
after our protest. So, so personally, I was devastated. Nixon got the White House.
Yeah.
He was probably pretty sure that Humphrey was not going to be that viable a candidate, and McCarthy wasn't going to get it. So it was a very frustrating time.
Yeah. It was heartbreaking.
But it's
frankly.
great to hear your other guests today. There's a lot of optimism there. There's a lot of things that are being done, and whether it's boots in the street as we were doing, or activism, community activism, and voting, getting out and voting, organizing, getting good candidates to run. They've made it hard to protest.
Yeah.
It's hard to protest, and it's frustrating, and others are going out to protest and finding that this is also true.
Justin, what do you do these days? I think you're living up in Wisconsin and you got yourself a publishing operation going?
I do. Well, this is mostly for my book and for some future projects. But interestingly enough, I didn't think I'd talk about this, but I'm actually a candidate for the Iowa County Board.
Right on. So he does not live in Wisconsin.
Yes, he does.
Oh, you do? Iowa
Iowa County is in.
Yeah,
Middle
Sorry.
Point.
just west of Madison.
Sorry.
Oh, and what are your chances?
I'm unopposed.
Oh, man, that's
Chances
great.
are good then.
So we'll have another progressive
Right on.
politician in
Excellent.
office somewhere.
Well, we're going to have you back, Justin OBrien, author of Chicago Yippie! 68.
Thank you.
Love everything about,
Where do you
what
get the book? It's around town. I know you've been on a bunch of shows.
I have. You can get it at Quimby's on North Avenue. You can get it at the Book Table in Oak Park, the Bookseller in Lincoln Square. It's also being carried by Reckless Records,
Aha.
Perfect.
Logan Square Hardware and Records.
You got a
City
website?
Newsstand on Cicero and also in Evanston.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And the website, you can buy it directly from the website at garrettroom.com. It's with 2 R's, 1 T, Garrett Room. Garrett is in an attic. That was where I started.
Well, it's great to have you, and it's great to have Renato Mariotti and Robin Potter and Nieves Bolaños. And next week we're going to have another candidate for Attorney General, Sharon Fairley, and we're going to have the incomparable James Swanberg, who is going to be performing at our benefit on February 11th. He's also in a group called the Lemons. And we encourage you all to do good in the world because the world needs all the good that you do. And real quickly, Tom, who's going to take us out with
Phil Oakes.
I meant Phil Oakes.
All power,
All power to the people.
Yes.